Welcome to the second video in my Introduction to Ableton Live series. In this video we're going to be going over creating tracks and making some sounds in Ableton. I'm going to have some slides up on the screen so you can follow along, but if you'd like a copy for yourself, I will include a link in the description to a download. So to start off, creating tracks. Create tracks from the Create menu, and you can create a Midi, audio, or return track, or just drag and drop the item in the drop area. So let me show you what I'm talking about. If you go up to the top, once Ableton's selected, create, audio, MIDI, return tracks right here. And take note at the shortcuts. We have Command T, Shift Command T, and Option Command T. So let's do all those right now. Let me delete these. So Command T creates an audio, Shift Command T creates a MIDI, and Option Command T creates a return track over here. Alternatively, if you need a track, let's say you need a MIDI track, so let's drag an instrument over, let's drag an operator over here. It automatically creates an instrument track and drops the operator into it. Unlike audio tracks, MIDI tracks require an instrument to be able to be heard. So this MIDI track has an operator in it, and now I can play it. But with just a normal MIDI track, there's nothing to be played. But you do see the velocity signals down here. The harder I press on the key, the higher the velocity. And if I click softly, short velocities. The instrument that you put in a MIDI track can be virtual or an external hardware instrument. Now, a virtual instrument will include something like an operator or analog. Or if you go into your plugins, let's grab a strobe and drag it over to the MIDI. And now you will hear sounds. If you wanted to have an external hardware instrument, I will create another MIDI track right here. Let me close off the sends and returns to make more room. So I have this MIDI track here. Let's go over to Instruments and External Instrument. We can drag that in, or if you have this MIDI track selected, you can just double click and it adds it. But it will replace if you double click something else. So if I double click this impulse, it changes to an impulse. We want external instrument. So now I have my mini brute set up. If you go to Preferences, which is Live Preferences, or click Command comma, go to the MIDI sync. Make sure that your external device is connected and able to send and receive MIDI. So you want to have track on and sync on. Right now I have it on my mini brute. There's two mini brutes here. I guess there's some kind of an issue with the routing in Ableton, but I have it selected for the ins and outs of the mini brute and the mini brute unknown MIDI device. So now if we have this external instrument selected, we can send MIDI to the mini brute and accept audio from tracks 1 or 2, which is the input of my Sapphire, which right now I'm using for my voice. And I don't want to connect the mini brute because of phantom power being turned on. Alternatively, something that you could do is create a MIDI track and an audio track. And you could route the MIDI track through the I/O, route the MIDI to the mini brute, and have the return audio from the external input. And record the output of the mini brute or any other synthesizer that you're using. If you do use an external instrument, you cannot record to this track. You can only record MIDI. Insert MIDI clip just to show you what I'm talking about. You can only have MIDI files here. You can play MIDI files from the external instrument, but you cannot record audio to it. You would need to have a separate audio track. Clips can be audio or MIDI. So here I have a MIDI clip. There's nothing in it, but if you look down here at the clip overview, you can tell that it is MIDI because you don't see a waveform and you see this little piano roll over at the side. Now this is an audio clip, which happens to be a clap sound. And you can obviously tell that this is audio and not MIDI because you see a waveform and you don't see the piano roll. Audio clips refer to audio files, MIDI doesn't. So these audio clips have to be stored somewhere on your computer in order to be played. MIDI doesn't. MIDI is just MIDI information that's stored in your Ableton Live set folder. So the folder for this track or this song that you're making, all of the MIDI data is stored in one file together. While the audio clips can be numerous audio clips stored from any place on your computer, an external hard drive, or in your Ableton Live set folder. Creating clips. You can drag in files, record, double-click an empty clip, or choose Insert MIDI Clip from the Create menu. So if I have a MIDI track selected, you can double-click, right-click to Insert MIDI Clip. The shortcut for that is Shift-Command-M. Oh, let's select an empty one, Shift-Command-M. Or you can go up here to Create, Insert MIDI Clip. You cannot do this with audio files. You have to either record or drag in a file. You can drag in MIDI clips, but specifically for audio, you need to drag in or record something. I'm double clicking, nothing's showing up. And if I right click, it just says remove stop button. There's no way to create a blank audio file. You can drag something in by going over here, going over to your sample folder. So I used to use Live 8, so I went over to my Live 8 library and just found a clap. And I just dragged it over here. Oops. I dragged it, actually, this is beneficial. I dragged it over to an operator, and it's asking me if I want to convert this sound to a harmony, melody, or drums. So let's say the clip I happen to drag over was a piano piece. I might want to say harmony, and then it'll create the harmony. It'll extract the groove, extract the sounds and the melody of that clip and move it in. If it happens to be a drum loop or something, then it'll recognize that and make it into drums. I didn't mean to do this. It was just a single sample, so it's not really going to do anything except create a single clap. So I'm going to cancel that. Let's drag it to the audio like I intended, and then there you go. Dragging from the browser. I just demonstrated that by dragging in this clap sound. Dragging to the wrong type of track will convert the track type if it's empty. So let's create a MIDI track over here. So if I drag this clap into an empty MIDI track, the MIDI track is converted to an audio track. And if I have an audio track and drag a MIDI clip to it, it changes into a MIDI track. But that's only if it's empty and doesn't have a device already in there. You can also drag a group of files to tracks while holding Shift or pressing Command to select multiple files. So I'm going to select these two files. I can drag it over here. Or if I select the bottom one, hold down Shift, select the top one, it selects all of them, drag them over. Recording in session view. When a track is armed in session, a square stop button turns to a round record button. So I have, let's say, alright, I have this audio right here. If I click this, notice how the square buttons will be turned into record buttons. This works for audio and MIDI. So now this is a MIDI track, does the same thing. You can record by clicking one of the round record buttons. So if I click this, now once it quantizes to the beat, which is set up here, notice how it took a little bit of a time to start recording, but now it's recording my voice. You can stop this by clicking spacebar to stop all recordings, or click down here at the stop button to stop the recording for this track. This works the same way with MIDI, so if I have this MIDI selected, click record. Now if I play notes on the piano, even if you can't hear it because there's no device in there, you still see the MIDI notes show up. And I can click spacebar or the stop button to stop it, or this scene stop button over here which stops all clips. Another cool tip if you're trying to record a bunch of stuff at once is these buttons up top, the new and then the session record button. If you click new, it moves a scene down from where you last recorded. So new, record, and it automatically starts recording. So now I can play these notes, click new, record, play more notes, spacebar to stop. So now I have 3 MIDI files with recorded information. This works the same way if you have several clips record enabled. So if I hold down Command and then click the record button, let's click New, Record, and it records both at the same time.